I would like to address the tension between US law and international law.
Okay.
In August, the US claimed that it seized 4 Iranian fuel shipments headed for Venezuela. If a US judge considers it legal, does it mean effectively piracy is acceptable?
Well, not morally, but there, you know, there's a limited, um, there's, it seems as if we have not created an international system in which state actors and especially great powers are subject to constraints beyond their own interpretation of their domestic laws or of binding international law or of ethics and morality. Um, in 1945, when the current world order system was set up in the United Nations Charter, it was fondly hoped that when there were disputes about such things, um, either the Security Council would play a big role, or there would be an international court of justice that would adjudicate state-to-state disputes. And of course, in those early days, the United States signed up for the mandatory jurisdiction of the International Court of Justice. But since the mid 1980s, it's turned its back on that regime, making it impossible for Iran to sue the United States in the World Court. And of course, unlike Iran, the United States has a veto on the Security Council, making it not a venue where the other states' interests can be pursued effectively. So what you're dealing with is unaccountable great power, and the question is, as with great power in a domestic setting, what ought to be our politics to try to reduce the unaccountability of great power?
Is there a way to do so in this case, or when, for example, the Justice Department indicts Nicolas Maduro, which could then be used as a justification for even a bombing campaign or an invasion of the country?
Not really. I mean, an invasion seems unlikely in any near term, but there's an extraordinary history of American interventionism in the Latin American region, really back more than a century, and in the world at actually an increasing tempo, massively in the Cold War, and to an almost unbelievable extent since the end of the Cold War, when many hoped there would be a more kind of egalitarian, multilateral world. So no, I don't think there are, for those cases, a lot of near-term constraints. So there has to be a long-term political project. I think the Europeans are quite crucial, because with the rise of China and the decline of, what is to all intents and purposes US empire, there seems like an opening for, mid-level powers between the strongest and the weakest to exert some demand for a different set of constraints. That didn't happen, sadly, during the Cold War. So if there's a new Cold War that the Americans decide to fight, or that the Americans get the Chinese to fight with them, you can't predict very propitious circumstances for any better form of international law. any more robust enforcement of its norms or the creation of better norms. So it's difficult to say what the long-term politics should look like, but I'm pretty certain it should involve mid-level states.